We're up to the Mishnah. We're continuing to learn the laws of bequests and inheritance and so on. Mishnah. Kuf Lamed Vav. If somebody writes over his assets to his children. Now, the whole idea is a person generally wants to continue his ownership, but he also wants to make sure that when he passes on, it stays his children. Whatever he gives the children, he doesn't want it to become theirs until after he passes away. On the other hand, generally, if you write a contract or something, once you pass away, since at that time you couldn't give the contract or write it, it doesn't work. So we made a special thing that we spoke about yesterday in the last few days, called a Tzavar Shchimera. That the Chachamim said that whatever he says is considered as if it's written down, and you can even write it down, and so on. So here we're talking about a case is a healthy person, and this is a story. So Ram has an interesting story here. A healthy person that he is about to marry another woman, and he wants to make sure that the children of his first wife, get their portion of their mother's Yerusha, for example, gets a fair share of the Yerusha before it gets distributed to more kids. So he wants to write a gift to his children while he's healthy and he's about to get married again. So he wants to protect his original children. He's and he wants to write that, but he doesn't want them to have it now. He has a long life to live. He wants to make sure he has it. So he wants to give them a gift that doesn't take effect until after his passing. But on the other hand, how does he make it theirs then? So in a way, it's like a life tendency. He wants them to have the property now, but as long as he's alive, he has full use of this item. He writes over his assets to the children, but they can only use the goof is theirs, but the paytas, the use of it, the ishtamshus of it belongs to the father. Sorry, he has to write. He has to write that this takes effect from today, and it will take effect after I pass on. So because it doesn't really take effect till you pass on, but already it's more than just retrospective, as we'll see from today. Matna's body, because as a Yerusha, then the din is when you pass away, the children you have, that's what it is. It's just a Matna's body. This is how you overcome all the rules of the Teda, that gives dinim and how you give a Yerusha. Yeah. If he wouldn't have put the word Hayyim, it just says this should be yours after I pass on. Let's say this man writes, it's useless. Because right now nothing happened. You want the thing to be effective once the guy passes on, but if he would have been alive, he couldn't have done it then, so it's nothing. And Nachmed, the children automatically Yarshin, so it belongs not to everybody. How can he give it away? So by adding Hayyim, he overcomes that problem. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. These are words Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says, Eina tzarich. Rabbi Yossi says, you don't have to add the words Mehayyim. Now, why in the world he says you don't have to add the word Mehayyim? L'chayda isn't that a problem? We'll discuss. Then the Mishnah continues. Let's say he writes over his assets to his son or to anybody. Now remember again, we're talking about a case of a Rabbi Yehuda Mehayyim L'Achamisa. Rabbi Yossi don't need it. So in other words, who actually owns the item? The son. Who has the use of the item? The father. So it's sort of a strange partnership. Is of any yochalim because the father can't sell the property anymore. He gave them over to his son. But the ben any yochalim because the son can't sell the property either because he has no use of it. The father has total control. What happens if Machar of the father sold? He can only sell what he has. What does he have in it? The use of it is so someone else can step in until the father dies and use it. But the moment the father dies, it gets transferred back to the son. Machar haben, if the son sold it, ein lekeh ben klum. The bekeh has nothing in it until the father passed away. Then it transfers over to the son. Because you pay 10 cents to the dollar, the son is desperate for money. Yeah, this is the only thing I can sell you. You're taking a risk. You're taking a big risk when the father lives another 100 years. That's what it is. Like we learned in the beginning, Marcus. You sell a ksuba. You're taking a risk. You pay a lot less. People take risks all the time. What's the share market? Says the Gemara, we know that by a get, when a person writes Mahayim, a guy says to his wife, he wants to make sure that she doesn't get stuck if they have no children. So he writes her a get, but he doesn't want to divorce her, he wants to stay married to her. So what do? He write Mahayim. I have a sefer at home called Kiddush Hashem. This is a sefer written by Rav. He was a historian, besides being a Mechaber Sfarim, he was a historian, and he wrote about life in Poland before the war and during Warsaw Ghetto. And then, unfortunately, he's one of the Kadeshim, and they found his papers, manuscripts, 10 years later, or whatever, in the late 50s. So they put a safe together. Fascinating. He describes Ger, Bava Basra Daf, everyone. Beautiful. But he writes there, he was on the Bezin, and he says there that during the Warsaw Ghetto, dinner Tater was not very many. And he says, Gittin. He says there was only one case of a get that he presided over. And he says the whole city was there and everybody was crying. He's a Chassidish Yid, I can't remember what kind of the denomination, the Chassid was, who was married to a German Giedis. He writes there, she was a Russian Tzikonius, and Yimach Shemam, when they came into Warsaw Ghetto, so she claimed, I'm a German. And the children are German citizens. So they told her, the German army, whoever it was, told her, if she divorces her husband, then you're German. If you're married, you're a Yid. So he said we presided over that thing there. He said the husband was crying, the mother was crying, the children were crying, because obviously nobody wants a divorce, but it saved their lives. And he was taken away. I don't remember. The name of the Sefer is called Kiddush Hashem. So he, so here's a case here. The same thing. He has no interest in divorcing his wife, but he wants to protect her. So there it says when you write Hayom al Achamisa, get the Eina get. We don't know what it means. You're writing Hayom al Achamisa. Is the pshat is it's like a tanai? If I pass away and no children, then Hayom is a get, and you don't need yibum mechalitza. Or did he change his mind? First he wanted to give her a get, and then he thought about it. I don't want to give her a get. And therefore, if it's a chazara, then there's no get here. So what do? We treat it as a suffix. He makes, and if he taka dies, we don't know if she can marry the brother. Look, maybe it was taka get, you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife or divorced wife. Is chayletzev lemesebemis. So how come over there we say there's a suffix, and here you're telling me that that's how you're supposed to write the get, and we're saying there's no country, no suffix. It's machamisa mehayim. So the Gemara Hasam Misapkal on Ituna Chazar have it. Over there, there's different possibilities, so we don't know which one it is. Here there's no two stages. Over there it's possible two stages. That there's a get and a get with Mafreya. Mashenkin over here, he's saying here, over here we can touch here it's possible to have two stages. Right. Over there, either you're divorced or not divorced. Which one is it? What did you mean? So we don't know. It was a Tanai, it was a Chazara, so therefore we have a suffix, treat like a suffix. Over here, it's possible to have two stages because every item has the goof and has the paytas. There's the thing itself and there's the paytas, and therefore it's possible that the goof happens straight by hayim. So both chal, there's no conflict in two. The goof is chal hayim, but the paytas is only the dividends and the use of it is only after the father passed away. No, not at all. I'm dividing the thing into two. I not thinking it's good. I'm dividing it into two parts. Everything has the chatchila. This is the arrangement we have, like shutfin. But you have one normal shutfin is we both have exactly the same things. Here you have the goof and I have the paytas. Rabba Barabu Cholash was sick. All the gabe. We have a number of times in the Gemara we have these things. All the gabe. Rav Nachman went to Mavak Chayla. Rav Nachman said to Rav Nachman, you know what? Do me a favor. I'm embarrassed. You're older than me. Who's the halacha like? Is halacha like Rabbi Yossi? You don't have to write Mahayim or not. Malay. Rav Nachman said to Rav Huna, time of the Rabbi Yossi lay down. I don't understand what Rabbi Yossi is even saying. Halacha. How can I even act in the halacha like him? It doesn't make sense for Rabbi. Why shouldn't you have to add a hayom? Because if it's lachamisa, it's not a valid get star. I'll make a deal with you. You ask him whether the halacha is or not, and then by the time I know I mean halacha, and then I'll explain to you Rabbi Yossi svara. But even I said, Nachman asked. Nachman asked Rabba Barabu. The Rav said halacha ke Rabbi Yossi. Halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Bosa the Nofko after they went out. The time Rabbi Yossi Rabuna said he kept his part of the bargain. You know what Rabbi Yossi's logic is? Why you don't have to write Mahayim? The Amari says, you wrote a date in the star. Why bother writing a date if the star does not take effect till after the person passes away? So that's exactly when it takes effect. I don't need a date. Why are you writing today's date on it? You wrote today's date if it's irrelevant. You wrote today's date on it because it is relevant. So you want part of it to happen now and part of it to happen acham leisei.
I didn't know which one was booked.
It doesn't say. Then if that ever happens, we actually had in Gittin, why you write man by Gittin we write man. It's always comes a chum. I'll tell you, don't use man at all. Only comes a chum. In fact, you just raised a good point. Two things. First is machlek is a shaynim. What it means man is shtar mechirchla. According to some shaynim, it's only if he instructed the sefer. By the way, when you write these details down, make sure you write today's date. Only if he gives that instruction. If he doesn't give that instruction, then it's just a standard thing that Seifrim write. It means nothing. Other Rishonim hold doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make a difference. The fact he knows you're putting in a date, and he didn't stop you, which you need to understand why would he have stopped you? But if he didn't stop you, it's tantamount to him giving instructions, and it counts. Another big machek Rishonim is because Rav by Gittin says that we don't we're machmir not like Rabbi Yossi, but we're machmir that you have to write mahayim ola chamis. So there's Rav arguing with his whole Gemara, even though it's the same Rav. Does that mean the Rav changed his mind and he decided that that's it? He's not going to pass Rabbi Yossi, or is he only machmir by Gittin because it's a matter of H Z? So let's be machmir, incorporate other Rabbi's idea, and what it is. Says the Gemara, and since today it's all starters have zman, so therefore automatically Allah Rabbi Yossi. Boy, Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman question. Bahakna Mao. What about a star? No, star has two uses. Sometimes the star itself is the way of the kinyan. I'm giving you the property, and you're kind of through star. Sometimes the star is just to tell you what happened. You write a document that Reuben made a kinyan suda or whatever. Reuben made a certain kinyan on this let's say land, so it's not suda. Reuben made a kinyan on this property, and you record it. So my question is, it's a star raya. It's called a star raya. This is my proof that belongs to me. The star isn't the kinyan itself. The star is a deed. What's a deed?
The witnesses, they're witnessing.
The Reuben don't stand star. The age of star. Yeah, that we saw Reuben by. Yeah.
This star
this is exactly. That's called a star raya. So boy, Minei Rav Nachman. So Rav asked Rav Nachman a question. What about Bahakna? What about a star that tells you that there was a deal was done? Would Rabbi Yehuda still argue and say you have to write Mahayim? Or no, when does Yehuda argue only if the star itself is the kinyan? If Yehuda says if the star itself is the kinyan, then you must write Mahayim la'achamisa. But if the star is telling you that something happened, then even if you just write la'achamisa, it's all right, because whatever happened before he died. Because he's writing now a star. Forget about that. There's no date on it. Maybe you don't might. In this case, you don't need a date because it's not the star that's affecting the kinyan. The star is telling you about another kinyan that took place, and it took place obviously when the guy was alive. So that's good enough. Obviously, he says Mahayim takes care of it. There's a machlek d'shayim, but this is exactly both. Actually, the machlek is if the shayim Rabbi Yosef, the shayim is only Rabbi Yehuda. The Rashbam and others are good, so others say the question everybody. Yeah, he's boy Minei Rav Nachman. Bahakna Mal. Amalei Bahakna in a tzaddik. He's like, no, you don't need to. Because obviously the guy was alive at the time, so you don't need to. However, that puppy says depends. Ika akni also the tzaddik, the Ika akni also the tzaddik. Depends on the text, the syntax of the star. The way Rashbam learns, faces disagrees and others agree. We'll learn Gemara later that every star, you start off with what the tent of the star is, what I'm going to do. On this time, I'm going to buy whatever it is, and then you go through all the details, and then you always in the last line make a summary. Just like by a bracha, you always at the end. The end is a summary of what it's all about. Whatever. So you repeat again at the end. That's how the Rashbam learns. Tosfos says no. The last line is really a summary. It's not really the star. So we're talking about you wrote next to each other the following. This is what our puppy says. Depends on the syntax. If you wrote Akniya, the guy writes in a star, I told these people to transfer this land to Yankel, the Kaninim and it happened that Adim then went ahead and took the land and acquired it on behalf of those. I gave them instruction and then they did it, they acquired it. then then you don't have to write or anything else because you wrote right here. It's extra. It's an extra line, and you wrote it. But if you wrote kanina mene, the akne, if you wrote first, they bought from me, and then he said I gave him instructions. The akne, there's nothing extra here. You're explaining what right did these Adam have to buy from him, that person, because it must be because I told them to. If there's nothing extra, then tzaddik you have to write. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to write mahayem lachamisa. In the first case, it's the extra word. In other words, the shtar has extra words in it, and that shtar, because it has extra words in it, that extra word is saying that it happens right now. It's as if it's mahayem. As if you remember, Rabbi Yehuda holds you have to write mahayem. It's as if you wrote mahayem, but if there's no extra words there, then there's no mahayem. It doesn't take effect until after Misa. It doesn't work. Maskif law. Wow, he's saying you're so nuanced. Me, we ourselves don't even know this prat you just said. It depends on the way you write. Which you write first and second. Safra Yoda, the Safra Dain know these things. The more it turns out to be that the Safra Dayanim know more than Rabbanim because Shalunu the Safra Dabaya the other. They asked Abaya Soifrim and they knew exactly the difference. That's a discipline. Yeah, Sifra the Rabba the other knew. Rabbi Huna no. In both cases, if you wrote both terms, you wrote I gave them instructions to transfer it, and they went ahead and made a kinyan for me to be zeich on behalf of that person, then that's good enough. You don't have to write any more mahayeh. Says the Gemara. So what's the machlek between Rabbi Yeshua? When do you have to write mahayeh? Ubeduchrin pisgomi. We're talking about not a shtar kinyan, a shtar raya. By a shtar raya, where you don't write. This is not the kinyan. This is just telling you an event that happened. And in other words, beduchrin pisgama. We're trying to remember. This shtar is here to remind us. Oh, this is what happened. That happened in front of us. Please, that's a machlekes. That is a machlekes. In other words, a shtar kinyan doesn't need, but if it's a shtar, yeah. Where it's a memory, yeah. So that's machlekes. Says the Gemara. You learned this way, and we learned and it wasn't a question, it's just a statement. That Bakana you don't need at all. And the star that's written the kin you don't need at all. It doesn't matter what syntax you wrote. It's only when if there was, let's say, we're remembering things and there was no kinyan that took place. In other words, if there's a star that in the star itself it writes that a kinyan took place, that's what you have an evidence kinyan took place. So then you don't need mahayim. You're clearly saying that it happened. When the star doesn't talk about a kinyan, it just tells you that we know there was a transfer of properties between Reuben and Shimon, but there's no kinyan written there. He's just reminding us. Then that is when there's a machlekes if the right mahayim or not. So the Gemara, we learned. What happens if Machar ben B'chayav? What did we just learn? The father gave over to his son the property, but he has life tendency, so therefore the father has the use of the property. The property itself belongs to the son. So what happens if the son then turned around and sold the property? So our Mishnah says nothing really happens until the father passes away, and then the deal is a deal. That's if the son is alive. If the son is alive, so the father passed away, he goes to the son, and from the son straight away, it goes across to that other person. Because Kolman, the father is alive, the son had nothing to sell. The father had the full use of the property, so he really didn't have nothing to sell. The moment the father passes away, the son Yasha, and straight away, he goes over to that other person. But what happens if the son didn't survive? The son predeceased his father. So the son predeceased his father, the father dies. Does it now get transferred to that lekeach, or do we say it does not get transferred to lekeach? It goes, it stays in the family. Downwards, it stays in the family. In other words, did a sale happen while, the question is, did anything happen at all while the father was still alive? Or do we say nothing happened? It only kickstarts as soon as the father passes away. Well, no. The sale already happened while the father was alive, but nothing can be transferred until the father passed away. So therefore, even the son predeceased his father, as soon as the father passed away, the sale already happened before. So therefore, he moves over to the lekech. Now, what's going on here? What's the machlekes? Remember, the father has the use of it, and the son has the thing itself. Lekech is not kaina. Why not? Because the son had nothing to sell to this lekech. What do you mean nothing to sell? Because the question is as follows. The Gemara uses the terms, we had this in Gittin, Kinyan Pedus and Kinyan Haguf. Do we say, when you own something, what do you own? So in the Shivish world, is the Shtamshus and the Etzim. When you say you own something, what's pshat? Does that mean I have exclusive use of it? No one else can use it. So all I really have is there's nothing between me, no relation between me and this cup. It's the use of the cup that's mine. So therefore, all I really have is the shtamshus. That's all it is. Or the pshat knows, and much deeper, is a metaphysical relationship taking place there. When you make a kinyan, it's not just that I have exclusive right to use it. The cup itself somehow or another became mine. The cup itself became when this entered the reshus of Avram, whatever it is, something with this Allah became, because it's not just the use of it, it's the thing itself. There's a kinyan in the thing itself. So the question is, kinyan paid is kinyan goof. It's only one and the same, because there is no such thing as kinyan goof. Or you say kinyan paid is lav kinyan goof. There's two things. There's the use of it, and then there's that thing itself. If you learn that all I have in this is the use of it, so what did the son sell? The father, while he's alive, he had exclusive right to use this object. So the son really didn't get anything yet. It's like the father is a writer. As soon as the father passed away, he goes to the son. So when the son sold it to somebody else, what did he sell? He had nothing to sell. Because Kinyan paid says Kinyan Aguf, and that was with the father. So therefore, if the son predeceased the father, nothing happens. Big Machek is a shayim. If the son had a son, does it then move over? How do we understand Yerusha? Is Yerusha the father, or is it passes on from the father to the child? If the Yerusha is the father, it's as if the father is still alive, and then it passes on to the Kech. If you learn the Yerusha is that it passes from the father to the son, well, the father had nothing to sell, so nothing was sold. Even though we use an expression later on, we'll see later in Bava Basra Daf, how literally do we take that? Anyway, so Rabbi Yechon says, like there's not koina, is not koina. And the Shlokish says kana lekech. The Shlokish says the lekech is koina. More explains. Rabbi Yechon lekech is not koina. Why? Kinyan paid is kinyan aguf dummy. What does the father own? He owns the thing itself. So what did the son sell? Nothing. So therefore, if the son passed away before the father, and then the father passes on, there's nothing. The lekech has no rights here. He never bought anything. But the Shlokish says. The Shlokish says there's an interesting discussion in the Shayim actually whether it's a mekachtos or not, because he sold something can the guy come to the children and say, I want my money back? Because the whole thing is a mekachtos. And the Shlokish says kono lekech. Others say no, because he knew that this is the risk that you're taking. It depends who passed away first, and he wholeheartedly gave it away. But this become more like the sugi of a smachta. Reish Lakish says, "Kana lekech." No, lekech is kana. You had something to sell. Why? Because kinyan paid as lavki kinyan aguf dami. The father had the right to use it. The son had the object itself, and that's what he sold. If that's the crux of the argument, didn't we have exactly the very same argument in Gittin and in other places? If we had this very machlekes, even we learned if I sold you a field in Eretz Yisrael for the fruits. The field itself, I retained ownership, but you have the yield for the next 10 years, or you have the yield. Do you bring Bekurim or not? The person who bought the rights of the field, the fruits, does he bring Bekurim or not? Remember, it says the and so on. Does he bring the Rabbi Yechon says maybe Bekurim. Why? It says Ha'adom Hashem Satali. Rabbi Yechon says you can say that. Even though all you have is the fruits, you can say in the satali, as we'll explain, because he holds kinyan peidas, kinyan aguf. So you can say in the satali. And the Shlaki says maybe the eina koida. The Shlaki says that you bring bekurim because you cannot really say adama shena satali, because according to the Shlakish, all you have is kinyan peidas, not the kinyan haguf. So therefore, you cannot say adama shena satali, but so you don't say the psukim, but you still bring it. Why? Because it says Asher Tovi Ma'artsecha. It's like it's still your land. The Tesis finds it hard to understand. Others say, yeah, others, if you tell me you can't say the psukim because you can't say Nasatoli, then why do you have to bring Bekurim from this field? How can I say Ma'artsecha? It's not your land, Manushach. Therefore, Tesis learns it's only with the Rabbanan, we want you to bring the Bekurim. But the Rashbam learns is Mahatayda. Somehow or another, Ma'artsecha is not as strong as Nasatoli. Natali has to be mamish yours, and kinyan paid is not good enough. When it comes to artsecha, because I'm the only one who can use it, you can call it in a way artsecha. It's like a difference. Rabbi Yochanan, maybe a kodesh of a keep making of dummy is yours. Maybe in a kodesh keep it up, keep of them. So what need both for? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, I'll tell you why. There's a chiddush in this Gemara here. Generally, I hold, and everyone knows that I hold kinyan paydas kikina guvs on me. Here, there's a chiddush in our case over here, where the son sold it onto a lekeyach, and he died before the father. That nothing happened there. You know why? We're talking about a relationship between a father and a son. His father, the whole, as the Rashbam gave the original story here, he's doing it to he wants his son to have make sure that his kids are protected. You know, he's marrying another woman, more children will come on the scene. He wants his first kids to have, you know, whatever, a bigger chelik. So he wants it for his son. So therefore, I would have thought that the father, the gabe son, maybe says, you know what? In this case, even though normally halachically kinyan pedikin goof, it's my son. You can have the goof. Maybe the father is happy. You know, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, the way we're learning now, there is a kinyan aguf, but generally we say that the kinyan aguf schleps along with the pedis. What's kinyan aguf? Pedis. But here the father says, I want my son to have something. It's my son. So therefore, and I trust him, you know, we're not going to make so I'm going to just kinyan pedis. So the father might have divided the two. Or we could think that in Indian you can separate the two. So therefore, I would have thought that the son sold it to somebody else. It's a sale. And even though the son died before the father, whenever the father passed away, it goes to the kech. Kamashwa, no. Why taka no? Because maybe no is there is no such thing as kinyan aguf on its own. All you have is kinyan pedis. All you have is exclusive use of an item, and therefore, if all you have is exclusive use of an item, there's nothing. If the father kept that, there's nothing to give. There's nothing to give. There's nothing to give as much as he wants, but there's nothing exactly. There's nothing to give. Rav Shimon says, why do you have to argue as well? I hold generally kinyan peidas is not kinyan haguf. Over here, I would have thought that in this case, maybe it's kinyan haguf completely. And I would have thought in this case over here, the son had nothing to sell. I would have thought, since the father is very worried about he has another 30, 40 years left to live, and I know the children won't turn against him. And unfortunately, it happens times. You read cases of how children take their parents to court to stop them from spending the money because they're spending their Yerusha. So, Gabi Nafshe, as much as you love your son, when it comes to yourself, even when you have a son, you want to protect yourself. So even though generally kinyan paid as lav kinyan goof, and the goof I gave over and paid keeping, but in this case, I'm worried about myself, my own, where am I going to live and all that. You keep the goof for yourself as well. Maybe you gave nothing to your son. That's what we would have thought. You gave nothing to your son. He had nothing to sell. Kamashlan, that kinyan paid as lav kinyan aguf, and therefore, just because the father has a right to use it, doesn't make it his. Interesting. Rabbi Yochanan is lucky. Rabbi Yochanan is lucky is a question. Rabbi Yochanan holds kinyan paid a kinyan aguf. That's a question. It says we learned it before already. If he said nechosai lach, it says to Reuven, I'm giving you my assets. Va'acharecha, when you finish using it, or if you pass away, then Yirash Pliny, I want Shimon to yashin it, and Va'acharav, and after Shimon, I want Yirash Pliny, I want to go to Levi. Of course, we had it before. I can give it to you tonight. I'm giving you a certain amount of time. So therefore, what I'm really giving you kinyan paydas. You don't really own the thing.
He doesn't have a to give it to someone else.
Except for Shimon Gamliel holds you could, but the Kohen Achamim you can, because according to Shimon Gamliel, I gave it completely to you, and then whatever, if there's something left over, after if you sell it, fafal. If you didn't sell it, then this guy passes away, he goes on to the next person. The Achamim say, no, you can't sell it because all I really gave you was use of it. And when the person passes on, he goes to the next person. What about Mei Sedishan? So what happened? The first person died, then obviously Kohen Sheni. What about Mes Sheni and then the second person dies? Kohen Shlishi, exactly where you made up. But what happens if Mes Sheni b'chayidishin? Shimon died before Reuven died. Does it transfer to Levi? But Levi's only connection to Reuven is through Shimon. But Shimon is no longer around. He's Yachsu nechasim liyoshidishin. So where does it remain? With Reuven. It remains with Reuven. Now l'chayda, if you tell me that kinyan paid as lavka kinyan goof, so the person who gave it, the donor, who gave it to Reuven, kept the goof for himself, right? He says to you, you use it, and then you pass on the Shimon. So what I give you, kinyan paydas. But if you hold kinyan paydas, lav kinyan aguf, so who owns the goof? The donor. So if Reuven passes away, and this story here, Shimon passed before Reuven, why does it stay with Reuven's family? When Reuven passes away, it should go back to the Noisen, to the donor. because the goof was by him. Doesn't that prove that Kinyan paid us Kinyan a goof? And when you gave Reuben the use of the field, you gave him the field itself. So if Shimon passed away before Reuben, it stays in Reuben's family. Doesn't that prove that I'm right? So he says, if he misa the Yoshe Noisen, but should have said to the Yoshe Noisen that you go back to the Noisen donor is a raya that Kinyan paid us Kinyan a goof, and you gave everything over to Reuben. Rish is undeterred. Rabbi said in Bubble, and Acharecha shiny. This particular case is different. You know why it's different? Because you clearly said that ultimately you wanted to end up with Levi. It's in this case, it's as if I clearly said I'm giving it away permanently. What am I giving? Even though to you personally, I said you have to pass it on to the next person. But ultimately, wherever it ends up, I don't ever say go back to me. It stays there. So I'm not only giving away the paytas, I'm giving away the goof over there. So the shlach in this case, because you spelled it out, acharecha, and those I don't want to come back to me. So I'm giving you paytas and goof. I'm giving you everything. And that's why in this case, I made it to Rabbi Yechon that it doesn't go back to the Noisen, it stays with the Reuben if Shimon died before Reuben. So he said, Chen Rami, Rabba Baravuna Kamei Rabba Amar, and he skipped the same question. Rabba answered, Acharecha shiny. Acharecha is different. But there's another brayso where it clearly says Yachzor Yoshe Noisen. You're telling me that everyone is Moide B'Acharecha. We have another brayso where it says that clearly that even in the case of Acharecha, it goes back Yoshe Noisen. So Gemara says Tanoyi. Big Machik is showing him what exactly Tanoyi. Tanoyi is the concept of Rabbi Yechon Shlokish Kinyan Perek You've done that Machlekes, or whether Acharecha is shiny, whether Acharecha means Kinyan Perek Yingul. So what's the Machlekes Tanoyi? The time we learned the Braisa. He said, guys, he said Nechosai Loch va'Acharecha lePloni. So I'm giving it to Reuben and Reuben to Shimon. V'yorad Rishon, and Reuben went in. Umachan, he sold the property. V'ochal, and he ate, consumed. Hasheni moitzim miyad alakuchas. The Shimon can go then once Reuben passes away. He can go to Reuben's buyers, and you have no right. He had no right to sell to you. Why had no right to sell to you? Because Kinyan paid us lav ki Kinyan haguf dummy. Because he only had the right to use it. The item itself had to pass on to me or belong to me, and therefore he had no right to sell to you. In other words, this Braisa holds Kinyan paid us lav ki Kinyan haguf, even in the case of Acharech. Divrei Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Ein l'sheni ela mashashayidishin." Reuben had the right to sell it. Why? Because Kinyan paid it. Kinyan goof. Kolzman Reuben has the use of it as if he owned the thing itself. And if he sold it, he sold it. It's not found. So we see clearly from here two opinions. But meanwhile, as a question, it says. Now we ask a question. So we have a machlekes with Rebbe and a Shimon Gamliel. Rebbe holds, it seems to me clear, Rebbe holds that Kinyan paid his lavki Kinyan aguf, he had no right to sell it. And if Shimon Gamliel says Kinyan paid Kinyan aguf, he had every right to sell it. But when you ask a question, it says nechosai loch v'acharecha leploni. If the nechosai is to you and acharecha, to Reuben, and then afterwards to Shimon, the first guy has a right to sell it, right? In other words, Kinyan paid Kinyan, and who is this? Rebbe. Before Rebbe said you had no right to sell it because Kinyan paid his lav Kinyan goof, and here the same Rebbe says he has every right to sell it. In other words, Kinyan paid it Kinyan goof. Contradiction Rebbe and Rebbe. And then there's problem Shimon Gamliel. Here he says Ein l'dishin, he had no right to sell it. Ela achilos paid him about. All he can do is consume the payers. Before he said if he sold it, you cannot take it back from Kuchas because Kinyan paid the Kinyan goof. He had a right to sell it, and now you tell me that he has no right. What's going on here? Kasha the Rebbe, and the Shimon Gamliel. It says the Gemara. The Rebbe Kasha. Rebbe and Rebbe is not a problem. You know why? Hold the gufa, hold the pater. What did he sell? Rebbe holds that Kinyan paid his lav ki Kinyan haguf. So therefore, Rebbe says here like this that when Rebbe says that you had no right to sell it, that is when if Reuven sold to Shimon the goof of the thing. Kinyan paid his lavke Kinyan goof, Rebbe holds. So how did you sell the goof? How did Reuben, the first guy in line, sell the land itself? No, Reuben kept for himself the fruits and everything else, and he sold to the Keach the goof. It's not yours to sell because Kinyan paid us lavke Kinyan goof. And the second one is talking about what did he sell? The Paris. In the second case is he sold him the use of the fruits for 5 years, which he had a right to do because he owned the Paris. And that's what Rebbe says. Yes, you can do. Go and sell the pace. What about a Shimon Gamliel? The Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Shimon loy kasha. Hol lechatchil diavad. Even according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, remember the case in the top of the Bryce is he already sold it to the Kuchas and then he died. Whether the Shimon, the next in line, can go and take it away from the Kuchas. That's what already happened. Well, the Chatchila, even Shimon says, why are you trying to? The guy who gave it to you was so nice, so generous. He asked you clearly, I want you to make sure you have something left to give over to the next person. So why the Chatchila are you going ahead and selling it? You're going against what he really, even though he didn't make a tnai out of it. He didn't say, I'm giving you on the condition that you make sure you give it to Shimon. But that's what he wanted. So it's not right. It's not nushi to go ahead and sell it under his nose. But if he did, technically you're allowed to. So I'm going to buy based on that. We'll finish it here. Ezahu Russia Adam, who is a conniving Russia? In other words, conniving in the sense legally he did nothing wrong, but it's so underhanded, it's delicious. He tells Reuben, legally, you're allowed to do this. You can sell and make some money here. And don't worry about Shimon. Even though it's not a menschlichkeit, but you can go ahead and do it. That says that is a conniving person when you know whether the avoiding taxes or evading taxes, right? So avoiding taxes also is not to give people advice avoiding taxes. Maybe that's a good thing either. I don't know.